The Michigan Wolverines got a statement win on the road. We got some moving and shaking inside of the Big 12. And my goodness, does the SEC look tough? Let's go. It's the #1 college football show. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Thank you for watching on the Fox Sports app, YouTube, or listening wherever you get your podcast. Today on the show, we got to take a look at the Big 12, and now there are tiebreaker rules in place, and Oklahoma might have a way back in, but they got to take care of business later tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about what's left for Colorado to do, but we got to start at the top of the day. The biggest game of the day, which was #3 Michigan at #10 Penn State. And it was all to play for the Michigan Wolverines in this one. To set the table for you, for those of you that are living underneath that particular rock, they started this game without their head coach, Jim Harbaugh, on the sideline as the Big Ten levied its penalty against Michigan that led to Sherrone Moore calling plays. And from the jump, it looked like Sherrone Moore was going to try to air the ball out. But if you're looking at the stat line, it doesn't lie to you. J.J. McCarthy goes 7 of 8 for just 60 yards. But what was really impressive to me was not just that they leaned on that offensive line that goes 7 deep, and at one point were using all 7 offensive linemen to do so, but that they could, that against this Penn State defense that is really great at stopping the run, they were able to let you know they were going to run the ball down your throat and did exactly that. In the first half, we saw explosive runs from Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. And at the end of the game, we got to see the Blake Corum that we all know and love. And the guy goes for 145 on 26, bloodied his nose in an old school Big Ten style of way. If you're a fan of 1990s, even 1980s Big Ten football, this game had everything you wanted, because on the other side, Drew Aller was just not there, right? I'm talking about a guy that threw the ball 41 times against Ohio State, didn't throw it more than 20 times against Michigan. And at times you kept wondering, are they going to put this in Aller's hands? Are they going to let that guy stretch the field? Really, producer Tyler and I were trying to count how many times they allowed Drew Aller to go beyond 15 yards. And then how many times did he want to check down? But it was clear that Nick Singleton and Katron Allen were getting something going, but it wasn't enough to get them into the end zone. And this game really started to turn, not when Michigan was able to run the football in the second half, but by Michigan being able to play outstanding defense in the second half. I'm really impressed by that defense. Kenneth Grant ran down Katron Allen. That was a 340-pound defensive tackle that ran down one of the better tailbacks in the Big Ten. That shows you the kind of team speed that Jesse Minter has out there, and they can get you any kind of way they want to on that front 7. And then with Will Johnson and them on the back end, that looks like a national championship caliber team. And I think I have been saying this since September 30th when I ranked Michigan #1, to which people would say, RJ, but Michigan ain't played nobody. And I would say they have throttled everybody they played. Okay, well, we're finally going to get to see them play against a top 10 opponent and a team that, frankly, was still playing for a chance to win the Big Ten championship going into this game at Happy Valley. We knew that Penn State still reeling off of the 41-17 shellacking they took at the Big House, for which producer Tyler and I were on the sideline watching that game. And I was wondering, what does Big Game James have left for us? And not a whole lot. It was really some baffling coaching decisions made by James Franklin, going for 2 when we think you should go for 1, trying to make this into a 1-score game, not putting the onus back on your defense that was playing really well, asking Drew Aller to find some mojo and some juice that he just did not have against this Michigan football team the whole time. But what was really fascinating to me was just how on brand and pulling it in the same direction that Michigan football team has been. Like, I learned my lesson last year, and I've been proud of saying this because I don't make the same mistake twice, right? So last year, preseason, I left Michigan off the top 25 for reasons that I thought were all valid. You changing up the coordinators. You are flirting with the NFL for Jim Harbaugh. You got all these things going on offseason. All they did was march undefeated through to the Big Ten championship game, okay? This year, it's the same football team with the same sort of non-conference schedule where they ain't played nobody, right? But it doesn't matter that they don't play nobody in Ann Arbor, because ain't played nobody shows up to play somebody and then beats them 24-15 at their house without the head coach on the sideline. Okay? I've had them as the number one team in the country, mostly on the strength of them being this team, and Georgia not really living up to the expectation that we've all set for them, which is to throttle everybody they play, right? You tell me the SEC is tough, and I would tell you so is the Big Ten, especially this year. And against a Penn State team whose only loss comes against the number one ranked team in the college football playoff selection committee rankings, Ohio State, you expected them to, if they were going to do it this year, this was going to be the year to do it. And all I got to see was how Michigan played Michigan football, Jim Harbaugh football, to a T. The numbers for Drew Aller against that defense, 10 of 22 for 70, 49 rush yards, 2 total TDs, garbage time, right? Something he did against Ohio State. So if you think that Ohio State is good, and you do, you now have to think that Michigan is good, because now they played somebody and they beat them by the same margin, by 1 point more than the margin that Ohio State beat them by at home, right? I couldn't be more impressed with what they've been able to pull off there in Michigan, especially with all these things that have been swirling around the program, basically dating back to last year or earlier this year, right? Matt Weiss, all the way through to Jim Harbaugh sitting out of 3 games to start the season because of a violation of NCAA rules. Then to this, where the Big Ten levels its penalty in what this sign stealing scandal is only beginning to be, where he finds out after he gets off plane on Friday, he's going to have to watch the game from the hotel, to which you probably saw the tweets from the Michigan players and from Tom Brady and from Juwan Howard and from President Santaono saying bet. I don't know how I feel about a public Ivy League using some, shall we say, urban slang to get their point across, but the point was made, right? They go into Happy Valley, they get the win. Now, what does it mean for Michigan? I think that that's the number one team in the country. I'm going to keep them as the number one team in the country, precisely because they beat Ohio State the last couple of years, and I think that's one of the two best teams in that conference. And Michigan is doing what I asked people to do. When they know you're going to run the ball, can you run the ball? They absolutely can. And then you saw what I think people have underestimated about this Michigan football team, and the reason that I believe in what they are capable of. All of those players and all of those coaches absolutely positively love Jim Harbaugh. You saw Sharon Moore with his passion and his emotion coming through there with a couple of expletives to get his point across, how much it meant to him to go win that football game on behalf of a head coach that wasn't on the sideline. You got to see how J.J. McCarthy feels about that dude. Trevor Keegan feels about that dude. They all love him. Now, for those of us that, kind of live on planet Earth, we look at Jim Harbaugh and we think a good football coach, but sometimes it feels a little bit awkward, right? Feels a little bit off. Can feel a little bit weird. But everybody that I ever talked to about that man says the same thing. I love him. Why? He will back me to the wall. He has my back, and because he has my back, there's nothing I wouldn't do for him. And you could see that with Sharon Moore, who I think, by the way, has just made himself a Broyles Award finalist by really stepping into the active head coaching role in less than 24 hours, finding out it's on him whether or not they go win this thing against the toughest opponent they're going to face all year, and to come through the way that he did, the way that they did, leaning on what he knows most about that team is the offensive line being great. Now, I think it's also interesting to talk about what happens with Michigan going forward, right? Because you'll know that after the Big Ten put its penalty in place, saying that they're going to suspend Jim Harbaugh for the next 3 games or the final 3 games of the regular season from coaching on the sideline, saying he can coach during the week and all the way up to, just can't be on the sideline, that the University of Michigan did a very Michigan thing. They filed a restraining order against the Big Ten to try to stop this penalty from taking place. Now, they went to a judge who was a lecturer at the University of Michigan Law, and then it went to a judge who, I kid you not, was judge in the Connor Stallions versus Airbnb case, right? That you've seen going around the Twitters where, more or less, he got into trouble and they had to take him to court. This judge decided she was not going to basically rule on the restraining order on a Saturday. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but courts are closed on a Saturday. And then we'll see, right? Because he could coach even next week against Maryland. He could coach the week after against Ohio State. We'll see, right? Because I honestly think that if you're Michigan, you're doing this because you're aggrieved. And if you got the money to go spend on the lawyers to do this stuff, why not? Because you're doing nothing but galvanizing the fan base. And Michigan is still that place where they got James Earl Jones coming over the loudspeaker telling everybody that this is the greatest university that the world's ever seen. I'm like, If you believe that, that's one thing. But for us to hear that, it's something else entirely. And that was also interesting to see going into this game. There were lots of people that found themselves rooting for the blessed God independent Penn State against Michigan. I say blessed God independent because you'll know that Penn State was not a Big Ten school for very long, very proud of its independence, very proud of not really having a traditional rival inside the Big Ten. I tend to thumb my nose at the GDI. It's one of the reasons that I'm always reminding you that Notre Dame is in an open marriage with the ACC. So when I see Penn State is the people who are the people that want to be rallied behind, and we want to rally behind Penn State, I can't help but look at Michigan going, man, I envy y'all. Y'all get to wear the black hat. Y'all get to be the bad guy. You get to be the heel. Man, I love nothing more than a pro wrestling heel, and that is what the University of Michigan football team has turned into. Now, there's still lots of football left to play. They still got to get past a bowl-eligible Maryland, right? And a very, very, very good Ohio State team that's as good defensively as they are, right? We'll get to wait and see. But I think the other part about this is you build in an excuse for a Michigan fan that would stoop so low. I believe there are good Michigan fans that won't say, hey, we won this game without our head coach. You'll leave that to me, the person that isn't a Michigan fan. And you'll say that, leave that to somebody else when they play Maryland, when they play Ohio State, okay? If you are these other teams, though, you would much rather see Jim Harbaugh on the sideline because assume Ohio State beats Michigan. You want to beat Jim Harbaugh, and it wouldn't be him that you would be beating because he wouldn't be on the sideline. Jim Harbaugh would still be 2-0 in the last 2 times he was on the sideline against Ohio State. And that rivalry runs so deep and is so important that, yeah, it's going to chap everybody's behind. Like, that's the thing that really bugs me about this. And I would much rather that I got to see Jim Harbaugh on the sideline for the rest of the season because if this team does go and win a national championship, it's already tainted, right? Sign stealing has tainted this, okay? How they stole the signs, who else stole the signs, it doesn't matter because this is what we're going to talk about with this Michigan team going forward. And that sucks because I genuinely believe this is the best Michigan team that we've seen in 20 years. It's really, really good. It's very, very deep. And the players don't steal signs. They play football. They put a hat on the hat. They tackle. They pound you into oblivion. No sign stealing is going to make up for that, okay? And if you're looking at that team and you don't see a team that is a national title caliber, I don't know what to tell you about the sport. Because when you draw it up, that's what you do. You say, we're going to turn the passing game into a hood ornament in the second half, and we're going to run the ball. 32 straight runs in that. That was like a 2-hour game, or it felt like a 2-hour game. It wasn't. Because both of those teams were so committed to run the football, just Michigan was that much better at it. And yet another third quarter where nobody can beat Michigan, quiet as it is kept. They come out of the second half, and they know exactly what they're going to do, and they know exactly how they're going to get it done. Very, very impressed with this victory for them on the road, which right now is the best victory in college football. It's a one-loss team away, okay? Ohio State beat undefeated Penn State, but at home. You get what I'm saying here? It matters that you're playing on the road. It matters that folks were striping the stadium in Beaver Stadium, and you saw them absolutely holding their heads, going, what can we do against Michigan or Ohio State? And that is where Penn State is at right now. James Franklin is now 3-17 against top 10 opponents. You got to take it back 7 years for the last time that they were able to beat Ohio State or Michigan. That's really, really difficult if you're a Penn State Nittany Lion fan to stomach because you know you're a good football team. Like, they are staring at a 10-win season. They finish the way that we think they can finish, but they will finish at best third in their division because they can't get past Ohio State or Michigan, which leads many people to go, do we want to keep talking about James Franklin being head coach of Penn State? I'm going, I don't know who else you're going to go get, my guy. Like, that's the point here. It's being with a good woman that doesn't always treat you well. What else you going to do about this? You know what I'm saying? You be like, hey, dog, maybe you know you need to go get you another woman, and you be like, but look at her. Look at her. How can I go get another one? What am I going to do that's better than this? That's how I think Penn State fans got to look at James Franklin. Now, that ain't going to stop you from kicking the tires, but it is also going to remind you just how much money you have invested into the James Franklin experience, which on the field has not been the kind that you want to revisit each and every year that they play a top 10 opponent, especially in the Big Ten, right? because we got to take it back to them beating Utah in the Rose Bowl for the last time they beat a top 10 opponent. And that's really difficult because you don't much care about beating Utah. You care about winning the Rose Bowl, but you care more about beating Ohio State or Michigan because that's the road to a Big Ten title, and that is the road to a national title. So we'll see, right? However, this also probably a good place for me to tell all of y'all that Sharon Moore is probably going to be a hot commodity come December, because now that man is in back-to-back years probably, had Joe Moore award-winning offensive line and been able to turn out outstanding tailbacks that can absolutely hit those holes, and guys want to play for him. I don't know what else you need to look for except to say Sharon Moore might be a Power 5 coach. And if you're lucky, he's your Power 5 coach if you root for a bad football team this year. Problem with Penn State is you ain't a bad football team. You just can't beat Michigan or Ohio State. All right, let's go from that major game and a major win for Michigan to another major game, Pac-12, where Washington hosted Utah. And I got to tell you, I was in on this one. Number 5, Washington held off number 18, Utah, 35-28 in Seattle. And it felt back and forth, right? It is a defense at Washington that was giving up like 37.5. So you're thinking, okay, if Utah could put up 34 on USC, they ought to be able to score 30 on Washington. And that was about it, right? Problem with this is you not only got the Michael Penix experience, 300 yards passing, but you got the Rome Odunze experience. If Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide receiver 1, Rome Odunze is wide receiver 2. He's been legitimately awesome this season. And then you got the Dylan Johnson experience, because now a man who had not rushed for more than 100 yards in any game in his entire collegiate career that spans 4 years has done it against 3 teams in the Pac-12, and all 3 teams were ranked. He did it against Oregon in a win. He did it against USC in a win. And now he's done it against Utah in a win. It might just be that the Washington Huskies are developing a run game right before our very eyes, and that ought to be terrifying for anybody that has to play them the rest of the way. Notably, Oregon State, Washington State, and probably whoever they get in the Pac-12 title game. I was really impressed with how the defense for Washington bowed its back in the second half. We saw an unfortunate play where my man picked off a pass and how do you run all the way to the end zone and then drop the ball right before the end zone once again? We see this, it felt like every other week there for a while, and it kind of went away. And in this game, it goes from being basically 6 points to 2 because you pin them down at the 1 yard line, you get the safety, and all's well that ends well. But those are the kind of mistakes that were all over this game. Like, we saw penalties from Utah and Washington that we don't normally see. Most of them being procedural or just not paying attention to the details. Giving up holding penalties when you got them in 1st and 2nd and long. Getting these false start penalties. Getting these late flags. It's just not what we've come to expect from Utah in particular, but also a Washington team that doesn't just want to win the Pac-12. And that was the thing that I was looking for from Washington. Is this a national championship caliber team? Not right now, it ain't. You're giving up too much on the back end. You're giving up over 250 yards passing to Bryson Barnes, who was the 3rd best quarterback to start the year and now the best option for Utah the rest of the way. You got a defensive back in Sione Vaki who was getting what he wanted against you. You got a former quarterback in Jaquindon Jackson who was able to run on you. And if Michael Penix Jr. does not have the day that he had today, are you capable of beating Oregon a second time, let alone winning the Pac-12 championship? But you know what? They are doing what we asked them to do. They are winning every game they play, and they're beating what we think are good football teams in a deep Pac-12 this year. So it might just be that the Pac-12 is good and that Washington is playing against the Pac-12 schedule that is good. We don't really know, right? Because we're not going to be able to find this out until I think the Pac-12 champion gets into the playoff. There's a lot more moving and shaking to be done there. One other thing to take a look at here is just how the committee is going to take a look at Washington beating this Utah team versus, say, another undefeated team that we'll talk about here in a little bit, because right now it's not Washington just playing against Utah or playing against Oregon State or playing against Utah or, playing against Washington State or playing against Oregon, perhaps, in the Pac-12 championship. It's them playing against other Power 5 champions, notably one in particular. But you did what you needed to do against a really good Utah team that has shown they can beat quality opponents. Now you just got to keep doing it the rest of the way, because I think you're correct if you're a Washington fan. You went out, you're into the playoff. But are you into the playoff to win it, or are you just winning into the playoff? Because there is definitely a difference. And if you want to be the kind that can win it, you're going to have to fix that defense quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I don't know how you're going to be able to do that. Let's go from the Pac-12 big game of the day to the entire SEC, where we had one top 15 matchup and one team clinch a spot in the SEC championship. So let's go with number 14, Missouri, crushing number 13, Tennessee, 36-7. I didn't really like this Tennessee ranking to start because I remember them losing to a bad Florida team, and I remember Alabama absolutely handing them their head in the second half. But I wondered what was Missouri going to do after what was an emotional letdown against Georgia on the road. And it turns out Eli Drinkwitz had it right. We wanted to stand on business. The defense showed up against Josh Heupel's high-powered offense and held them to 7. All right? Like, Brady Cook was out there absolutely making it happen. And this also just underscores, okay, maybe Georgia's a lot better than I've been giving them credit for, because this Missouri team was one they handled. Like, it scared them, but they handled in the fourth quarter last week. This week, Missouri left no question about who the second best team in that division is. And it's arguable that they are a better team than LSU the rest of the way. We'll see, right? LSU gets that win, so we know how to look at this. But I got to say, I expected Tennessee to score more than 7 against Missouri. And it's been a while since we talked about Missouri being a top 15 program into the second or even third week of November. But that's exactly where they are. So if you are Georgia, you're going, see, the SEC is tough. Matter of fact, shout out to Kirby Smart, who believes that Vanderbilt is one of the toughest teams in all of America, because he's saying, hey, you don't think we're any good, come down and get you some of this SEC. Yeah, dog, I'm going to schedule Vanderbilt. I'm going to schedule Mississippi State. I'm going to schedule this year's Arkansas. I'm going to schedule this year's A&M. It ain't that deep is what I'm saying, right? But it is deep enough that Georgia gets to tout this Missouri win as a big one. Now, they've got another game they're in the middle of playing right now as we tape against Ole Miss, and we'll talk about that on the ranking show on Sunday afternoon. You'll see that Sunday evening. That's going to have a big impact, I think, on the college football playoff race, especially if Ole Miss can come up with the win. Now, one other thing to take into account here is that, Missouri came from behind, meaning it was 7-3. But if you are down 7-3 and you're Missouri, you're going, okay, anybody want to put the hammer down? And you put the hammer down, man, I would not want to play you the rest of the way, right? Whoever they got left, good luck to you, because that's a good football team that deserved a shot at the New Year's Six. May still get there, but they're probably not. It's a really good football team that's just going to finish outside of contention, but maybe next year in the 6+6 format, a Missouri team like this could make the college football playoff as an at-large bid. It's really interesting to note. Now, let's go from that game to number 8, Alabama throttling Kentucky 49-21. I'm all in on the Jalen Milroe experience. I have been all in on the Jalen Milroe experience. I've loved Jalen Milroe since he was down at Katy Tompkins in Texas. But the thing that is most inspiring about him is how he has played since being benched for what we now know were not good enough quarterbacks in Ty Simpson and Tyler Buckner. Not only did he show his leadership as a quarterback who did not quit, but he came back, showed what he was capable of against Mississippi State, and never looked back. They have now beaten up on LSU and Kentucky in successive weeks, and with this win against Kentucky, they have demonstrated themselves to be the SEC West champion. And this was a year for which we thought Alabama was going to have a down year, right? You're changing up the offensive coordinator in Tommy Rees. You're changing up the quarterback where you were probably the least talented quarterback that you have been basically since 2016. And all you have done is turn Jalen Milroe into a Heisman candidate. I got to give a lot of credit to Tommy Rees on this one, because I did not expect Tommy to be able to bend the offense to one that suits Jalen's skill set. It's really, really impressive to me when a play caller can make his play sheet work for the personnel he has on the field, because I think that is what separates good play callers from great play callers. Jalen Milroe is a problem running and throwing the ball, but particularly he holds the ball. You got to get him out of the pocket. So boot him out, call some design runs for him, and let him air the ball out, because his deep ball accuracy is up there with the best in the sport. It's the intermediate throws where he still needs a little help and a little polish, but take those out of the book right now. because you don't need them. You've got Jam Miller, you've got Jason McClellan, you've got Roydell Williams, and you've got him, right? You can run 2 tight end sets because you can convince people that you're going to run the ball, and then you can have Jalen absolutely running into the end zone. Really outstanding game for him. 15 of 22, 234 through the air, a pick, 36 yards rushing, 6 total TDs. So he scored 10, 11 TDs in the last 2 games. I said it last week after the win against LSU. Alabama wins out, and Alabama manages to beat, say, an undefeated Georgia in the SEC championship game. How do you not give Jalen Milroe the Heisman Trophy? It's like that because, again, it's really impressive to see how they bounce back against from that loss against Texas, where they're still trying to figure out who they are, to becoming the best team in a loaded SEC West and with a shot to get into the college football playoff by just winning the next 3 games they play. Really, really fantastic stuff for them. Nick Saban said after the game, I think there were few people after Texas game and the South Florida game in particular, there were a lot of naysayers out there that didn't believe in these guys, but I always believed in this team that they would develop into something special. Greatest football coach of all time. That man, Nick Saban. It doesn't seem to matter who the coordinators are. It doesn't seem to matter what offense or defense they're running. He will find a way to will that team into double-digit victories. Even when there's somehow heat on Nick Saban after a loss against a really good Texas team at home, he finds a way to get that team to play the kind of football that he knows that it is capable of. He starts a true freshman in Caleb Downs at safety, and that dude could be an All-American. He sees it, right? Kool-Aid McKinstry had a really awful muff punt. Like, it went right through the breadbasket. Turned it over to Kentucky. They still bowed up, found a way. They kept Ray Davis in check. They did not let Devin Leary get comfortable. That defense is terrifying. I'm really impressed with this Alabama football team. I dare say, yeah, that looks like a team that's capable of winning a national championship too. But again, they're going to have to prove it. Not only are they going to have to beat an Auburn team later this year that absolutely got a stomping win today, but they're going to have to do it against a team that has won 26 straight, looking to win 27 straight against Ole Miss in Athens right now. Again, we will recap that game on Sunday. But right now, it's Alabama, probably versus Georgia in the SEC title game. One of the things that you need to keep in mind here is, yeah, okay, should Ole Miss beat Georgia and should Tennessee beat Georgia, what happens? Well, seeing as Georgia beat Missouri and Missouri beat Tennessee, Georgia's probably still going to get into the SEC championship game. So once again, assume Alabama beats Georgia. Are you going to keep Georgia out of the college football playoff if you are on the selection committee? I don't know, right? This is the place where Washington needs to be afraid, because if Washington is not undefeated, they really don't have a leg to stand on. Same thing with an Oregon team that runs the rest of the table and wins the Pac-12 championship. Same thing with a Texas team that could be one loss. Like, you're looking around, you expect the SEC and the Big Ten champ to get in full stop, and undefeated Florida State also can muck this up. That's where we're headed next. Number 4, Florida State beating Miami 27-20. This game was all over the map, right? Because I'm not really watching this game because I don't think Miami's any good. And I know at the start of the game that Tyler Van Dyke was benched in favor of Emory Williams, who looks unlike any Emory Williams that I've ever met in my life, but apparently was a player, because they wanted to go with Emory Williams over the guy that was completing 66% of his passes and had thrown for 2,000 yards already this year, because he would absolutely take care of the football. Like, Shannon Dawson was like, we can't have the picks that Tyler Van Dyke has been throwing and expect to win football games. He's got a point, because we're talking about a Miami offense that had 11 turnovers in 4 games because Tyler Van Dyke was the quarterback. That can't happen. But I'm also looking at this going, Florida State's at home. It's a Miami team that is not as good as their 6-3 record would suggest. I expect Florida State to do, well, what I expect any number 4 ranked team to do against an unranked opponent, and throttle them, and they could not do that. Once again, we had to wait to start the show because we were unsure about how Florida State and Miami would end. Now, I've been saying all year, the way that many of y'all think about Michigan is the way I think about Florida State. I don't think they played anybody. I don't think they're that good. I think that it could be another 2014 Florida State where they run through the ACC, win the ACC title, go undefeated, and then get stomped down by Oregon or whatever the college football playoff selection committee has them playing that game. I just don't think they're that good, but they find ways to win. So I got to give them that much credit. But do you think that Florida State is a better football team than Washington is a very good question. I don't. I think Washington continues to build a better resume because the schedule is broken out that way. But also, they beat the teams that they're supposed to beat. And some of their close wins look even better now because Arizona turns out to be really good, guys. Meanwhile, who is Miami? Miami is a team that lost to Georgia Tech. You know what I'm saying? The second best team in the ACC is Louisville, who was in a dogfight with Virginia. And Virginia ain't no good. Now, that said, Jeff Brom might actually end up walking away with the Coach of the Year award. But you get my point here. There's nothing about Florida State that tells me you got a Heisman winner in Jordan Travis or a Blitnikoff Award winner in Keon Coleman. There's nothing about what Mike Norvell is doing right now that has me believing that he's a Coach of the Year candidate just on how they've had to win these games. You're at home. You're in Tallahassee. You got people doing the chop. But you are in a one-score game against a Miami team that would not even start its best quarterback. Because why? I don't understand. If Florida State expects me to take them seriously, they need to beat Miami by 3 touchdowns. They need to do to Miami what Alabama did to Kentucky. You know what I'm saying? I need Florida State to be better than we win every game because, again, that's the barrier for entry into this thing called the college football playoff. We want perfection. That's the bar. After that, we want domination. Okay? That's why Michigan's the number 1 team in the country to me. They are dominating who they play. They will absolutely sit on your chest and you will not be able to move. Can Florida State do that? Or is it the same team that needs to come from behind against a Duke team that lost its starting quarterback and was losing to that Duke team when the starting quarterback was on the field on one leg? Is it the same Florida State team that was tied against Miami with the backup quarterback at Miami at home? Right? I just don't see it. So please tell me in the comments whether or not I'm wrong about this. But I don't see it. Until Florida State starts stomping people out in what is a watered-down ACC, where we got Clemson, who might end up get 8 wins this year, not being great. What do you want me to do here? Like, I thought maybe North Carolina would show us something, but they lose to Georgia Tech and Virginia. We're looking at a Louisville team we didn't think was able to be good, but their only losses against Pitt, who's awful. This is not helping Florida State's case. That's the whole point there. But if you're looking at Florida State undefeated, and they win an ACC title, and you look at a Georgia team that walks into the SEC title undefeated but loses to Alabama, who are you putting in? Florida State or Georgia? It's Georgia. You ain't got to lie. You got to go to church tomorrow, so don't lie, all right? Don't repeat for something you got to do tomorrow because you know damn well you would expect Georgia to get in that spot before undefeated Florida State, and Florida State would have a bone to pick, but there's nothing about the eye test that says they pass it. Speaking of which, let's take a look at another conference that is on the fringe, hoping to get an invitation to the college football playoff. And that is the Big 12, which got absolutely upended today thanks to Central Florida. My goodness, UCF blows out number 15 Oklahoma State 45-3. Smoked them. Absolutely smoked them. Central Florida running back R.J. Harvey, who was running all up and down Oklahoma back when people was telling me that, Central Florida is not very good. I don't disagree with you. But he went for 206 against Oklahoma State. Okay? And then they held Ollie Gordon in check. Like, this is a dude whose PR staff is sending out Heisman invitations. Like, I'm a member of the Football Writers Association of America, right? We put in the first ballot for All-Americans on Friday. Along with that, we got, Heisman candidate Marvin Harrison Jr. And I'm looking at this, I'm going, why do I have a Heisman candidate, Ollie Gordon? Oh, yeah, that's because that dude's been absolutely decimating Big 12 teams, except Central Florida. Not only did Central Florida smoke Oklahoma State, it is Central Florida's first win against a legacy Big 12 member. They got their first Big 12 win against Cincinnati last week. Gus Malzahn finally has his team looking like something that we recognize offensively. And then what they were able to do against that Oklahoma State offense is frankly impressive because Oklahoma couldn't stop Alan Bowman, couldn't stop Ollie Gordon, couldn't do much at all with that offense last week. But it seems like Oklahoma State left its entire game at Bedlam, selling out to go win that game, which, you know what? I don't fault you for that. I would have sold out to go win that game too. But if I saw a 42-point deficit in the offing, maybe I would have held a little something back. You know what I'm saying? So what does this mean for the Big 12? Okay. It means that the Big 12 championship race is wide open. Now, Texas playing Texas Christian, and we will talk about that game again on Sunday, along with Ole Miss Georgia and along with USC Oregon. But suffice it to say, Texas better take care of business against the Texas Christian team that has owned them in the last 5, 6, 7 years, okay? That's one. Two is, either way this goes, either Oklahoma, who's playing West Virginia presently, and we'll talk about that game tomorrow, or Iowa State, with a win against BYU later tonight, will join Kansas State and Oklahoma State in a four-way tie for second place in the Big 12, which leads us to tiebreakers. Now, also naturally leads me to talking about how Oklahoma can make the Big 12 championship game. Now, the reason that I'm going to lean into that is A, is me. B, is because it's actually important, because Oklahoma has the only win against Texas this year, and that can be a tiebreaker as we're looking into this thing. Now, the Sooners need some help from both Texas and Kansas going into the weekend. And turns out they got help from Kansas and may still get help from Texas. So Texas needs to lose one of its last 3 games against Texas Christian, at Iowa State, and versus Texas Tech team that just beat Kansas 16-13. Or Kansas needs to lose one of its, and it has, right? 16-13 to the Red Raiders. That game was also riveting. Jason Bean goes out early in that game, and Devin Neal got him back into it, tied the game up, 26 seconds left to go. Texas Tech gets a field goal, goes and earns this win. But the head-to-head tiebreakers go like this. Oklahoma has the edge over Texas should the Longhorns lose another conference game. However, with Oklahoma State owning the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Sooners, the Cowboys need to lose 2 of their final 3 games for OU to be back in that place. So Oklahoma State's lost 1. They lose another one. That might be all she wrote. Now, again, Texas is totally capable of blowing one of these last 3 games because it's Texas, right? This is really interesting for this race because Texas feels like the only team that can make the college football playoff out of the Big 12 right now. Matter of fact, I would just say it. Texas is the only team that can make the college football playoff out of the Big 12. But again, do you want that spot? And who would that spot go to? This is why Washington or Oregon can't afford to let down or let up, right? Same thing I think is true for Florida State. I think, again, the SEC champ, the Big Ten champ, they got nothing to worry about. But those other 3 conferences, they got everything in the world to worry about. And it's all to play for if you are one of those 4 teams. Kansas, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Kansas State. I mean, I'm fascinated to see how this goes. But more than anything else, I would love nothing more than Oklahoma and Texas to get to the Big 12 title game because, well, it's on their way out. And they would lock out all the legacy members and the new members who, by the way, have not had a great first year in the Big 12 title race. But all of a sudden, it looks like Oklahoma got a little bit of help and a little bit of hope going into the rest of the season, but they got to take care of business against a 6-3 West Virginia team, maybe 7-3. I got it mixed up right now, I think, but a good, very good West Virginia team going into tonight. All right, let's go back to the Pac-12, circle up with, well, the Pac-12 top to bottom, pretty damn good, guys. Number 21, Arizona beats Colorado 34-31 in the home finale for the Buffaloes. They lose 4 straight at Folsom for the first time since 2015, but if you watch the game, and I'm sure that you didn't because it was on a network that nobody could see, you would know Colorado played really well against a really good Arizona team. Shedeur Sanders looked good to decent. Travis Hunter had himself a game. You got to see Jimmy Horn getting back in the mix. I got to see Pat Shurmur smiling in the booth. You know what I'm saying? But it still is an Arizona team that has now got 3 ranked wins and is looking at perhaps an 8 or even 9-win season if they continue to pull this thing off. Like, I have no reason to believe they can't beat Arizona State. And all of a sudden, Jed Fish has the Wildcats trending toward being a sexy pick to win the Big 12 next year because you'll know people are changing conferences. And all of a sudden, those teams that are joining up in the Big 12, Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, they're not bad. So I expect the Big 12 to be full of fireworks and a lot of fun. Outside of that for Colorado, you got 2 games left, and with 2 wins, you're bowl eligible. That would be tremendous for Colorado if they can somehow win these last 2 games after losing 6 of their last 7 after getting off to a 3-1 start. It's not been a storybook season for Coach Prime and the Buffs, but you know what? They're still setting records. They still sold out the game today. Everybody showed up for the game today. They're probably going to be good to decent on offense next year, as I don't expect Shedeur Sanders to declare for the draft. I expect safety Shiloh Sanders to come back too. Travis Hunter's got another year of eligibility, and they're going to get a little bit better in the portal, hopefully, at offensive line. But it's all still there to play for the Colorado Buffaloes, who I think stand a shot at getting into a bowl game this year, especially knowing just how many bowls there are and how many teams need to fill them up. Might just take one win. Could be 5-7 get in there. All right. We're going to talk about Georgia and Ole Miss, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Texas Christian, and USC, Oregon, along with the AP and my top 25 rankings on Sunday on the number one college football show. But that's going to do it for this episode of the number one college football show. Our number one college football show leads the screening are Jack Coakley and Torrin Westfall. They make us better in the film room. Production assistant Kiara Santana puts special in our special team. Social producer Javion Duncan makes sure the recruits and the rivals see the cake we bake. Chad Boulay is sending in the signals. Senior producer Catherine Cordaji sees the entire field from the booth. Lead producer Tyler Wojak calls the plays from the sideline, and the play snaps on my clap. We will see y'all on Sunday. Deuces.